Hey, everybody. Welcome to this continuing study of American prophecy. And we know that in Revelation 13, that the lamb-like beast that comes from the land, like parallel to the conquest of the Canaan land, and we know that that's America's history of the doctrine of discovery, and it becomes a kind of a promised land. Well, it's a parallel. But remember, it becomes an image of the first beast. And so we're going to have to kind of spend some time on the first beast, or the concept of this beast as Leviathan. And the Leviathan beast is the quote original first image that we've already identified as the 1260-year reign through the Justinian Code, the papal power upon this earth. That's a kind of a quasi Christianity that's linked up with civil power, worldwide civil authority, and its power to enforce its authority, rule, and reign, its dominion. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time on Leviathan biblically, and then we're going to touch on some very important and powerful insights that this book talks about. And in fact, you're going to see that what I have here is many books on governmental Leviathan. Okay, the whole Leviathan concept. So we're going to deal with Leviathan, but first we must know what Leviathan is, what it is biblically, to understand that the Bible is our true guide in defining for us the times in which we live, and to help us to rightly negotiate our way through and to navigate through these times. So let's spend some time on Leviathan, so we can understand how the image of Leviathan rises up and comes into a global, worldwide power that enforces the mark of Leviathan. The image of Leviathan enforces the mark of the beast, right? This is the beast. And then you have that image. So what we're going to have to look at is Leviathan. So let's spend a little bit of time. Whoops, I didn't properly prepare my screen like I should have. And let's look at Leviathan. Right? Very important. All right. Check it out. So Leviathan. Leviathan comes from Levi. Hey, good morning, Brother Steve. And that's where we get Levites from. And you're going to see that we're going to really get into the definition: to join, to bond, to bring somebody into debt. This is what the word Leviathan is. But let's just look at the biblical references to it, and then we'll really kind of break down the beast and its biblical nature as Leviathan. And then we'll see this image of Leviathan that enforces the authority of Leviathan at the end of time, which we're in now. So here we go. Job chapter 3, verse 8, King James Version. I want you to read this. Here's the word Leviathan. Let them curse it that curse the day, who are ready to raise up their mourning, to mourn, to grieve, to be under great weight and grief. And it's the word Leviathan. And you'll see that other translations translate this Leviathan because it's Leviathan. So why does it say, let them curse it that curse the day, who are ready to raise up their mourning, their Leviathan? When you stir up any rebellion against the authority that Satan is, and the powers that be that lies underneath, Leviathan is a power that rules the unseen currents. And this is the pictures you will see how the Bible talks about Satan's ability to rule to the kings of the earth and to do his will, and that when Christ comes to establish or to announce his authority, that authority rises up to crush the authority of Christ. and you saw that when Christ came on this earth. Even in Jerusalem, even amongst God's people, Leviathan had found his many little baby serpents, his brood of vipers, to really consolidate power even amongst God's people. It will always be that way. And so You will see, let them curse the day, right? Who are ready to stir up or to rise up Leviathan, or their mourning, their grief, their sorrow, their pain, their regret, the horrors of stirring up that collective beast power. We see it in American politics and everything else. Don't go against it. Don't rise up against it, or you will pay the price. And you will see as we really get further into, especially when we get into the lamb-like beast and the ram, the Re'em, which is that lamb-like beast, goes against the little horn power, which is the beast power. And then there's the clash, and you will see that there will be this process taking place as it is now. And then that, quote, lamb-like beast will then be enforcing the authority and the power of the little horn power, or the he-goat. But let's look at another translation of Job 3, 8 and 9. But let him curse the day, curse it. Wait, but let him that curses that day curse it, even he that is ready to attack the great whale, Leviathan. Does it create great grief and mourning like going into the belly of the whale? Does it bring God's people into a great time of trouble, which they can't see through the portals of the tomb, as Jonah did? And did it create the great sorrow, the great affliction, the great prayer in which it ascended into the heavenly sanctuary? Just go back and read Jonah's prayer. Does God bring his people through a Jonah experience, and we are now swallowed up into the belly of Leviathan, just like Captain Sparrow jumps into the mouth of the Kraken? Is that going to be the trial amongst God's people? And is it something to beat our breasts and to mourn over? Because we're going to now see the power that Satan has in his rule, authority, power, and dominion on this earth. And it was shellacked. It was basically masqueraded as a smiling little dragon, on the everlasting story, and the kid riding the dragon. And we think it's cute and it's sweet and it's benevolent. And we're going to find out that you never challenge its authority. Verse 9 says, let the stars of that night be darkened. Oh, you're going into a dark place. That's why they call it the Dark Ages, when the papal, Catholic, ecclesiastical state power ruled. It was rightly called the Dark Ages, and it was an unquestioned authority. And we have Americanism and Protestantism, the separation of powers and the protection of the individual. That was a reaction from that dark age. Let it remain dark and do not come into light, and let it not see the morning star arise. What is the purpose? Why is Satan on full attack? It's so the day star doesn't arise in our heart. It's so we don't see Christ. It is to inhibit the return of Christ as the morning star, as the day star, as the one who rises from the east and then fills the whole sky with his presence when he comes to seize his dominion and to rule and to reign when Christ arrives in the clouds of glory. Satan is doing everything, quote, that we do not see the morning star rise. There's a note that was in one of the Bible translations. It says, some ancient sorcerers claimed the ability to curse a day by calling up a terrifying legendary creature such as Leviathan to devour the sun. What sun? The sun of righteousness, who rises with healing in his wings and comes as a fiery furnace to destroy the dominion and the power and the rule and the authority of the God of this age, the prince of the power of the air, the king of this, apparent king of this earth, who's only on lease after the fall of Adam, Satan. And so here's another translation, the CSB version. May its morning stars grow dark. Remember the morning stars? Remember when the angels sang at the creation of the authority and the dominion of God and his goodness, and he spoke these things into existence, and the morning stars all sang together. May it grow dark, may it wait for daylight, but have none. May it not see the breaking of dawn. This is what Satan is trying to do. He's trying to, as when Christ came into this earth, that the death of the infants through Herod, through that power, through that authority at the time, who saw himself as the king of the Jews, in which the Christ coming to seize his rightful place as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Satan is stirred up in great opposition against it. It is a great controversy between Christ and Satan. It's about rule and authority and dominion and who has ownership of this system that we're in. So the NET version. So you see, I'm giving you the different versions because all of this is implied in the Hebrew language around this Leviathan power. I'm just reading the same verse through the different translations because they're trying to catch the language that's actually in this verse so you can understand what's going on in this world and why all of a sudden the kings of this earth all rise up and they all kind of come together in allegiance, in alliance, in a confederacy against everything that's going to prepare God's people for the return of Christ, for him to seize his rightful dominion. And then Lucifer is going to try to bind and to try to insulate himself from Christ coming and taking that which is rightfully his own. In the mind of Satan, Christ is a thief in the night. So the NET version says of this same verse, we haven't changed verses, it says, let its morning stars be darkened so we don't hear from heaven. Remember, the power that Satan is working through the agencies of this world is seizing to cast the truth to the ground and to trample the sanctuary underfoot and to darken Christ's mediation in the temple in heaven, where the morning stars are darkened, where we don't see the angels and the administration of Christ in heaven and his mediatorial work in which we become heirs, co-heirs, sons and daughters of God through the imputed righteousness of Christ on the Day of Atonement. And so what Satan would like to do, because that is our access to entering into a co-heirship, is for us to reign with Christ through mediating his life, his resurrection, his obedient life, his perfection before the law. He became the perfect man and is mediating that. So we are written administratively in the Lamb's Book of Life so we could be on that grand roll call of that eternal citizenship. And Satan is doing everything that he can to thwart that, to darken that. Let it wait for the daylight, but find none, nor let it see the first rays of dawn, right? This is important to understand. Satan is looking for you to not see through the portals of the tomb, for you to not see the beams of light through the gospel, showing us the future eternal kingdom of God through the work of Christ in the Day of Atonement in his mediatorial work administratively as the high priest and eternal king, imputing his life and righteous resurrection and his perfect obedience and the covenantal oneness in which he has done all that was pleasing to God. And so Satan or Leviathan or the dragon power rises up to darken all of that. So we don't see the gospel of the day star rising in our hearts that brings us to a bright, full understanding of the eternal reign of Christ. Let me read it with more context in the ESV version. We're still constellating around the same verse and giving you context as to why Satan does what he does through the powers on earth at the end of time, so we can understand that Satan is an active agent working through the agencies of this world. Behold, verse 7 through 13 of Job 3, it says, don't read verses 16 and then 20, 26. Behold, let that night be barren. Let no joyful cry enter it. Satan is looking to close us in like Jonah in the belly of the whale, that great sea beast. Let those curse it who curse the day, who are ready or skillful to rouse up Leviathan. Hey, listen, it's no joke to slap the face of Leviathan. The he-goat power does not appreciate the ram pushing up against its authority as the little horn power. This is in Daniel 11. We'll get more and more into this as we go into our series. Let the stars of its dawn be dark. Let it hope for light, but have none, nor see the eyelids of the morning. In other words, this is to thwart the dawn of the return of Christ and resurrection morning for those that are sealed in covenant with God. Satan is looking to give you such an overwhelming sense of his authority and power that you believe that your life is caught up with Satan and his authority, his dominion, his power. That's why at the end of time, he's going to put into captivity and he is going to kill as a executive power of his authority on this earth. And we will believe that Satan has the power of life and death. This is truly the issue here. Who has the power of life and death? Do we believe that God's so powerful that he could from nothing bring us back to life based upon the life, the death, the burial, the resurrection, and the ascension and mediation of Christ? Will we transcend the grave, or does Satan, in his seizing of that which is under the sun and apparent and of this present age, does he really possess the power? And we're going to be tested in our faith, a faith that transcends the grave. It's stronger than death. That's the seal. Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verses 6 and 7. Because, verse 10 of Job 3, it did not shut the doors of my mother's womb, nor hide trouble from my eyes. We're brought into a Job experience. This is the whole Leviathan thing. Leviathan arose, and Job is giving you a blow-by-blow, front row spectator seat. He got backstage pass to the Leviathan show, and he's telling you what it's like for Leviathan to rise and to strip you and to darken the skies. Pay attention, saints, if you want to make it through the time of trouble, if it means anything to you. Why did I not die at birth and come out of the womb and expire? Why? See, we're born in sin, born under the pall of the failed covenant of our head of humanity, Adam. We're under the death verdict, and it's pending over us. Better to have not been born, we think. Why did the knees receive me, or why the breast that I should nurse? It's a horrible thing to come and to be born into the dominion of Satan with his giant dragon wings that are hovering over us, right? For then I would have lain down and been quiet. I would have slept, then I would have been at rest. You see, Satan is trying to offer you a false rest in himself, or the rest that you could only get in death. Or why was I not as a hidden stillborn, like Paul talks about in his whole treatise of the gospel and the resurrection, the mediation of Christ, and the return of Christ in the new body, and his ultimate reign and dominion of 1 Corinthians 15. Paul says, I was born stillborn. We're born aborted, disqualified, alien babies from the commonwealth of God's kingdom. And through the power of adoption, that is through the mediatorial, perfect work of Christ, standing as the perfect covenant-keeping man before God, we have, quote, the spirit of adoption. We have adoptive legal rights because of Christ and faith in him. By nature, we are, quote, aborted or stillborns. As infants who have never seen the light. Verse 20, why is light given to him who is in misery, and life to the bitter soul, who long for death, but it comes not, and who dig for it more than for hidden treasures? You see, this is the picture of the stinging of the locust for 5 months or 150 days, that you see that they sting, but they seek for death. They don't find death. And that is Satan that is accusing you day and night while God keeps you alive. And you are under grief and mourning and Satan's accusation, and his fiery darts are an accusation. And you are standing there like Joshua with your filthy garments in Zechariah chapter 3. And Satan is accusing you. And the only assurance you have is the imputed righteousness of Christ that you saw in Zechariah chapter 3, that's mediating in your stead, and his reproof of Satan and his accusations, because Christ is your advocate. He's your mediator. He is your ambassador before God. He is your champion. He is your substitute. He is the anchor to your soul, the assurance and surety that you have heirship, right standing, approval, that you are well pleasing to God based upon your substitute, Christ. And that will be tested. There are saints that really believe, oh, I'll be fine. Really? Are you spending time in these scriptures? Are you realizing the weight, the gravity, the severity, the stark raving horror of what the time of trouble really is? That all of your senses will be assaulted? That everything that you call real in this life will be turned against you? Can you at all rely upon your feelings or what you experience or what you are perceiving with your senses at all? At some point, are you shut into like a living grave experience in which you have to shut out everything in this life, everything you're feeling, everything you're experiencing, all of your emotions and everything else? Because everything in your experience and emotions is telling you that you are alienated from God. You must trust in that which God has promised and what you have in Christ, though it is unfelt and unseen. You actually have to exercise a steadfast faith that God calls being sealed. Or are you just confident? Oh, I've got this covered. I've got it. Hey, this is a swish. This is. I've got this 100%. This is slam dunk stuff. Okay, got it. By the way, you know what? The presumptuous don't make it. Pride comes before a fall. You have to be so fortified in these truths. You have to be so settled in not what you seen or what you could touch, taste, feel, the element. You have to be so in opposition to what is elemental to you, because they're all going to serve against you when Leviathan decides to use the elements of this world to come into his power, to literally to assault you at every possible way. If you're going by your senses at all, it will be a disaster. Who rejoice exceedingly and are glad when they find the grave. Yeah, death would feel better to die than to experience the living death that the righteous go through. The righteous go through. Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in or sealed? This is the sealing. No, the sealings, David, are feelings of ecstasy and gushy sentimental love. No, this is the seal. No, Dave, you got it wrong. You don't understand the other part of the story, David. It is filled with mystical goo love. Okay, child. Verse 24, my sighing comes instead of my bread. Your bread is actually like, the bread of affliction, of mourning, that God has portioned you this experience to seal you from the dominion of Satan. So you can say, you don't have dominion over me. Christ rules death in the grave. Where is your sting? I will plague you, O death, God says. I will punish you, O grave. And my groanings are poured out like water. For the thing that I fear just came upon me. My worst fears are being realized, and what I dread befalls me. I am not at ease, as my pastor and other evangelists and seminar speakers somehow convinced me of. I'm not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest, but great time of trouble comes. Trouble comes. Leviathan has been stirred up. Do you think really that you're going to have this kind of transcendent, mystical, I'm going to float above the stars and I'm going to twinkle toe through the eternal garden of bliss while all of this is happening? No, God has portioned you to come under the affliction on the Day of Atonement. How is God going to wean us from this enchantment of Satan if he does not show us the underbelly of the kingdom of darkness? God's people, faith, trials, tested, gauntlet, furnace, burning, fiery trials, strengthening faith, disavowing the sensual, what is seen, what can be touched, what can be tasted, what can be handled, that which is accessing that which is without hands. David, you don't know what you're talking about. You've taken crazy pills this morning, David. Uh-huh. Yeah, I've taken crazy pills. All right. Jeremiah 51, verses 33 and 34. It says, "For thus saith the Lord of armies," God's at war. He's got a great battle that he is dealing with. The God of Israel, in other words, the picture of overcoming, travailing, and then prevailing. The daughter of Babylon is like a threshing floor. This whole idea of "come out of her, my people," and the imagery of Babylon, because Satan tried to seize global worldwide power through the system of the Tower of Babel, and then 2.0 in the rule of Babylon. And then because you had Solomon's kingdom on earth, and Satan had to do his competition to that through Nebuchadnezzar and everything else. And then 3.0, the cosmic Babylon, in which Satan is working right now. It is a threshing floor, a testing, a trying, a place in which there is separation of wheat and chaff, the separation and the winnowing process where God separates us from the shell, this protective shell that we live in, to bring us as naked kernels, naked grain before God. It's time to thresh her. Yet a little while, and the time of her harvest shall come. It's harvest time. If you look at the third angel's message of Revelation 14, the imagery is wheat and harvesting on a threshing floor. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, hath devoured me. He's a type of Satan. This is not just for 600 BC or 500 BC. This is an image that we are to access at the end of time, and whom the ends of the world have come. And this is an example for us to glean from, to understand the eschatological setting that we're in at the end of time. Has devoured me, he has crushed me. He has devoured me, he has crushed me. Devoured me, has crushed me. But what about the twinkle toe bliss as I am prancing and dancing and doing pirouettes in the twinkle toe star zone of my being filled with feelings, David? Not happening. You took the crazy juice, false teachers. He hath made me an empty vessel. God uses the Leviathan power to create empty vessels. Doesn't feel good, but it is necessary for cleansing, for purging, for purification, for readiness for the return of Christ. He has swallowed me up like a dragon. Yeah, Leviathan. He filled his belly with my delicates and hath cast me out. You see, God is using Satan as a cleansing, a purging, a threshing, a purification process. He is nothing more than a vulture, nothing more than an animal that God says, don't eat of it. It's an unclean animal because it's used as a cleanup, a carry-on animal. A bird, or maybe like, a shark, if there's a dead whale, they all feel it's used for cleansing. It has its evil purposes, but God will use the evil, ironically, as a cleansing agent. That's the power of God, to take an unclean thing and to use it as a cleansing agent. God's a genius in his warfare. It comes from the word lava, where we get lava from, or Levi. And you're going to see that we get the Levites is the idea of what lava does. It joins. It comes out from the core pits of something, and lava has a way of melting things together. That's where we get the lava or Levi. It's a primitive root, primary to twine together, to bind together. As you see the serpents twining together on the pole, i.e., an implication to unite, to remain, as to borrow, to get money from, to get a loan from, as a form of obligation, or causatively to lend, to abide with, to borrow, to cleave, to join. In other words, that is pictured as cleaving together in a marriage or in a communal sense. That's what Satan looks to do at the end of time. It becomes, he binds his house together. And you will see it's an in or out kind of a thing. Out is keeping the commandments of God, trusting in Christ. He's your bridegroom. You're Sabbathing with Christ. It's a rule, a sign of his dominion. That's what the Sabbath law is all about. He is ruled to reign, and you are the wife under his canopy, his care, his works, his dominion, his authority, right? It's a picture of you are under the dominion, you're resting on the dominion of somebody else who has created the earth in 6 days. On the seventh day, he's rested, and he's called his bride to enter under his canopy, under his umbrella of authority, to rest in his works. So Satan is going to do the same in his, quote, Babylon version of it, the Tower of Babel version, to, quote, enter into a union with him through works. That's why the first day of the week, Sunday, is a memorial or a sign of Satan's authority, and that's why it's called Dominico, right? The idea of Dominico, or we get Sunday from, that's, if you go in Spanish, Dominico, dominion, to rule, to reign, to have authority. And it's the first day of works, and Satan is the king of righteousness through works. Let's look at this word lava or levi, and it's to join, right? And you're going to see the various ways in which this word is used so you can understand what Leviathan is all about. As you can see, Leviathan or Hobbes, Leviathan or climate, Leviathan or crises and Leviathan around rule and authority and power, or liberal Leviathan, to join you, to bind you, to pull you into a total confederacy with your, whoever you're joined, bone of your bone and flesh of your flesh, whoever you cleave to, join to. The eschatological picture that Christ gives us is joining to him, bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh, wife, husband. Matrimonial, Day of Atonement, is very picturesque of a matrimony, the return of the bridegroom in a jealous rage to destroy that which has molested and ravaged his bride, because he's coming back from a wedding ceremony. See, that's what the Day of Atonement is pictured as the cosmic espousal wedding ceremony. And he's coming back for his bride to bring her to the place that the bridegroom has gone to prepare, to bring his wife into the everlasting pleasures of an Eden 2.0. And guess who's here ravaging her? The dragon, the Leviathan. And he's looking to get her to join to him. The harlot's already done it because she's a hoe. She's already done it. She is a prostitute, right? The scripture says she's a whore. Just quoting the Bible. So Genesis 29:34 says, and she conceived again and bare a son, and said, now, this time will my husband be joined, that's where you get Leviathan from, to me, because I have borne him 3 sons, and therefore I will call him Levi. Exodus 22, because what are the Levites for? In the temple, they work in the temple court, and the idea is to join or to bind or to cleave God's people to God. The temple was called the house of God, and the Levites were professional joiners, cleavers. And how is it done? Through the ministry of reconciliation. How is that done? Through the shedding of blood, through Christ atoning, paying the dowry for his, quote, alien bride. Hey, Samson was told as a picture of salvation to go marry a Philistine, because that's who we are. We're uncircumcised Philistine women. Go read it. He was told to marry a Philistine. Exodus 22:25 says, if you lend money, why is Satan getting you in debt to this world? In debt financially, in debt culturally, in debt. Why do you think people vote for the federal government? Because the federal government came in as a savior to certain people group, and they will always vote Democrat because of, see, that was the whole thing is, are we a constitutional republic, or are we a democracy, or what are we? Are we a United States? Is it federal powers? Is it state powers? Do we have the separation of powers? Is there autonomy, or are we just kind of one conglomerate of nation, etc.? And the whole picture is that when you are, quote, giving out money, governmentally or anything else, you are, in fact, it's not for free. It's not for free. It is to levy you, to levy you, to bind you, to join you, to bring you under obligation. Nothing's for free. Oh, David, stop it. There are free lunches all the time. Okay. I'm the one taking the crazy pills. You're right. And money to any of my people that is poor by thee, and thou shalt not be to him as a usurer. In other words, getting profit from this. Neither shalt thou lay upon him usury and interest rate. Numbers 18:2-4, it says, and thy brethren of the tribe of Levi, right? Because Satan has his joiners, his pimps, his cleavers, his ability to glue you to him, as it says in the book of Job, as he has glued the scales of Leviathan so close together that they are sealed, that you become so dependent upon the Leviathan system that you are so joined to it that you can't even breathe. This is that air can't even pass through it. We're so bound to Satan experientially, sensually, what is apparent in this world. I have to go along to get along. The tribe of thy father thou bring thou with thee, that they may be joined unto thee, minister unto thee, both good and bad. You are joined to Christ. He sends angels and he ministers to you. The angels are a picture. The Levites are a picture of the angel party of the cherubim. I should say this, is the seraphim. It's those that are ministering around the throne of God. It says, and thou and thy sons with thee shall minister before the tabernacle of witness. And that's the role of the seraphim, right? And the Levites were a typology or pattern of the seraphim. And that you meet the seraphim and they join you through a coal from off the altar, just like Isaiah went through in Isaiah chapter 6. They're like the final angel kind of group that you deal with before you go into the presence of God. And that's what the Levites were there as a pattern of. And they shall be joined, Levi, where you get Leviathan from, unto thee, and keep the charge of the tabernacle. Satan has his own temple. Remember, this is a, quote, vengeance of the temple. Satan's got his own temple. He's got his own prostitutes to get you to join to the temple, emotionally, experientially, financially, sensually, in some obligatory kind of, he's accommodated you, whatever, if it's financial, if it's civically, if it's socially, if it's emotionally, whatever it is, Satan has a way of joining citizens of this world to himself that you feel like you can't live without him. Like every toxic situation where a pimp gets his number one girl to be addicted to him. Are you his number one girl? I hope not. For the service of the tabernacle, and a stranger shall not come nigh unto you. And it's the same thing here. Deuteronomy 28:12, and it says, the Lord shall open unto his good treasure. Hey, for good or bad, Satan has his copycat, counterfeit version of God. And what does he do? He gives you out of his treasury. He goes on a spending spree and he takes you shopping. Gucci, Dolce & Gabbana. Only the best for you, babe. And the heaven to give the rain unto thy land its season, and to bless the work of thine hand, and thou shalt lend unto many nations, and thou shalt not borrow. Now, this was God's original purpose for his people, and then Satan has seized that. We were supposed to be the head and not the tail. We became the tail. Satan has seized that. Whatever we neglect, Satan now picks up, and then he masters. And then what has happened is that Satan rules, reigns, has dominion. He lends. We borrow. We're in obligation to him. That's what happened to the children of Israel in Egypt. They were in a very advantageous place after Joseph, and then they were breeding and multiplying, and they had great power, right? They were in the fertile valley. So what happens? They start borrowing from the government of Egypt, where they became indentured servants and slaves, and then they came under the rule and the power and the authority of Pharaoh through lending, through borrowing. That's how they got to that state. That's the real history of it. Because they wanted to participate in the fun things, all the sports and the plays, the shows and the fashions of Egypt. Egypt was hot, baby. They had the best malls in the world. It was like Eden. It was like Sodom and Gomorrah. It was a secular Babylon. Very accommodating. Anyways, getting a richer, more robust, a more fuller spectrum of the meaning of Leviathan. So it says in Nehemiah, it says there was also, that said that we have borrowed money for the king's tribute. Now, this was meant for the kingdom of God, but Satan has seized that and has used this as a means, as a Leviathan on this earth for the lands and the vineyards. Book of Esther, chapter 9, verse 27. Upon all such as have joined themselves unto them. Are you getting the picture? To bind, to join, to be an obligation to. The wicked borroweth. Right? This is in Proverbs 22:7. It says, the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. You want to know why you are in servitude to Satan? Is because you took the bennies, baby. You took the benefits. It looked like it was for free, etc. I don't want to belabor this too much. We got a lot to go through. We're already 41 minutes into this. But you get the idea, right? The idea is lender, is borrower, is to join. Let us join ourselves, right, into a covenant. Cleave them with flatteries. Satan has his own Leviathan system. But he's made me famous. He's made me admired. He's given me prestige. That's the Babylonian robes. Only the Israelites all wore the same garments. They all wore the linen robe with the blue tassels around the hem, the ribbon around the hem. And there wasn't this status thing. There was just the king, the priest, and then everybody else. Like the picture of Christ. He's our king, priest, and then we're just dressed in white as co-heirs and citizens. We're the great cloud of linen wearers. But then Babylon was different color codes as to what strata and status that you have. And that's why Achan loved the Babylonian robe, is that was a high status robe in that kind of hierarchical system that they had. So that's the idea of Leviathan. It's the bind you through promoting you, right? Isn't that what Belshazzar tried to do with Daniel? Hey, I'm going to promote you. You're going to be the third most big shot guy. I'm going to give you a nice gold chain and you're going to be awesome. And then you get an Academy Award and all of your peers are going to celebrate you and they're going to know that you're number one, baby. And that gets you to bind yourself or to invest or to feel a certain amount of obligation or investment to that kingdom. And fortunately, Daniel said, do God's people say it now? Daniel said, keep your robes, keep your chain, keep your promotion system. I'm not buying, you're selling, I'm not buying. So the mystical, cosmic, amalgamated, confused sea beast, Leviathan, and then you'll see the dynamics of the land image, lamb-like beast that becomes its image. We won't go over Revelation 13, 1-15, but I would say look at it. Because what you're going to see is like in the book of Job, in which front row seat, Jonah, front row seat as to the great warfare between Christ and Satan and the great darkness that comes upon God's people, is you're going to see that just as those two beasts, the sea mystical beast and the land behemoth beast, joined together in this kind of feature in the book of Job to prepare Job to be face to face with God. And I hope you're seeing the eschatological parallels to that when God has a talk with Job, he says, be a man, and I'm going to describe two beasts to you. One's a sea beast, one is a land beast. And you don't really know the meaning of it, do you? And Job was rightfully complaining the whole time, and he was mystified as to the purpose of God Even Job was considered a perfect man in eschewing or resisting evil. And yet, everything turned against him. And then God says, stand as a man, because I'm going to describe two beasts to you. One is a sea creature, and he moves about as he wishes until I have leashed him. You can't control him. You can't manipulate him. I used him and his wicked ways and his all-powerful ways for my purposes to cleanse you, Job. And then let me tell you about the land creature, Behemoth. And let me tell you that land beast and how they work together actually as a great time of trouble for you, Job, to prepare you to be face to face with me, to be ready to stand before me, cleansed, purged, emptied, purified, naked. But David, that's not true though. I went to seminars where they said I would be filled with love goo. Right. False teachers. I said, let's look at that interesting standing before the Lord. That's a picture of salvation. That's a picture of what Christ does for us. He stands before the Lord. Thank God that he is standing before the Lord, because if I stood before the Lord, I would perish. Job realized that in our best estate, we are less than nothing. In our best estate, we are but vapor. In our best estate, we are but a puff of phantom smoke. In our best estate, it's the hardest thing for the saints to get through the cranium. We really think, yeah, no, but you haven't seen my version of my best estate. Job 40 verses 6 and 7, 10. I'm just going to go through basically touching on some Job 40 stuff. It says, ESV version here, then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Finally, he's in an audience face to face with God. That's an eschatological thing, you guys. When we're face to face, prepare to meet your maker. Prepare to meet your God. And everything is preparatory for that. John the Baptist was saying, prepare to meet the Lord. The Lord's coming, and he is soon to arrive to his people and to his temple, and you must be prepared. You must be cleansed. You must disrobe yourself. You must shed these little adornments and come to God in the animal skins that you really are. So then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Out of the whirlwind? Yeah, out of the great time of trouble, out of the four winds? Yeah, out of the four winds, out of the whirlwind, out of the strife, out of the trial, out of the testings. And all of a sudden, the clouds part. Job, there he is. And you're standing before him, Job. Sealed. But sealed through a very, very agonizing process of a sea beast and a land beast. And he says, hey, dress for action. The Hebrew says, gird your loins. Familiar phrase. Peter talks about it. Gird up the loins of your mind. Careful where your thoughts go. Be careful you're not ruled by feelings and experiences. Gird up your loins like a man. I wonder why Satan is attacking manhood so much now. I wonder what real manhood is. It seems to be likened unto what God does to prepare you to stand before him in the process of Job, or maybe Jonah, or maybe his people through Jacob's time of trouble. It's what Jacob had to go through, man's school. Huh. Mean broken school? Yeah. Like Christ broke himself for his wife, man's school. I will question you, and you make it known to me. In other words, you answer me. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want some answers from you. So when God comes in the clouds of glory, do you think he wants some answers? Do you think the ultimate question isn't, can I stand before you? Am I qualified? And God says, qualified? Let's talk about being qualified. Why do you think I sent my son? Why do you think somebody else had to impute qualifications and carry out a work that you yourselves would fail to, even on your, quote, best state or best attempt or even your best accomplishments? Would still be failed because it doesn't have the infinite, eternal inspection that I take it through, which Christ pulled it off with flying colors. Well pleasing. Verse 10 says, adorn yourself with majesty and dignity and clothe yourself with glory and splendor. How are you going to do that, Job? You have putrid sores all over you, Job. How are you going to come with splendor, Job? Does it have anything to do with Ezekiel chapter 16, which you are clothed with the splendor of imputed righteousness of a person who saved you from your own gurgling death rattle, Job? Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low. Tread down the wicked where they stand. Hide them all in the dust together. Does God bring our glory and our splendor and our majesty to the dust of the ground to prepare us to meet him? Is that even a thing? Do we not grasp that? Don't we understand the significance of that on the Day of Atonement? And the singular importance that is, that there is not an alternative preparatory process. It's not being filled with sentimental love goo of a mystic. It's non-mystical. And I thought I was going to be able to do this. I'm only halfway through the study, and I only want this to be an hour study. I'm going to have to probably part two this study because I wanted to read some passages from this book. I won't do it in this study. I will literally part to it tomorrow. Okay, I'll part to it tomorrow, and I'll get through some passages of this book. But it's important that we get this Leviathan thing down. So when I do the part two of this study, I'll continue on with the Leviathan thing, and I'll quote from this book. But we have to understand the nature of this and the purpose and the meaning of why God allows the sea beast and the land beast to come into this clash of and coordinated chaos of God as a cleansing and preparatory agent of a whirlwind in which God appears, and we are strangely prepared through a deconstructive process of God. Why are we listening to false teachers telling us that we're going to be filled with transcendent ecstasy of sentimental love experientialism? Why are you listening to that? Why is that given? We pay those seminar speakers. We make sure that their lifestyle is cozy and comfy. We honor that. It's like Paul's time. Paul is saying, why do you love these guys so much? They are abusing you. They're not feeding you the true thing. And if it's a true teaching, it's going to be this. It's not going to flatter you. You aren't going to be spoken sweet, honey, warm whispers in our itchy ears. Hide them all in the dust together, bind their faces in the world below. You will be faced towards the grave. Worship is on your face, looking down and realizing you are the dust of the earth, and worship will bring your face to the dust. You'll be in confrontation to your own limits and realize who God is and what you are not. That breaks the spell of Leviathan, because God is going to use Leviathan. If you're in a covenant with God and Satan is insisting on your obedience, on your acknowledgement of his power and reliance upon your well-being, upon his authority, and you refuse that, he will take you all the way down to the dust of the ground, either through death or through wishing you were dead. Dave, these are terrible teachings. I'm going to a different teacher. I understand. I know why we seek teachers to please our hearts. I completely understand that. I mean, it'll be to our own destruction, but I do understand. I understand. Then we'll acknowledge to you that your own right hand can save you. So, can your own right hand save you? No. So it's interesting. Behold, Behemoth, the land beast, which I made as I made you. He eats the grass like an ox, a wild ox, and you're going to see that as the ram beast, the ram beast of Daniel 11, the quote, lamb rising from the land and pushing with his horns, and is able to create this liberty power that is pictured in Persia. They were considered a ram king. The United States of America is basically using the Cyrus Persian system for liberty of religion and civic liberty, the two-horned beast that rises from the land, etc. America is a Cyrus power that delivered God's people from Babylon, but then becomes corrupt and where you cannot change its laws when it determines its laws, as you saw Persia became in the time of Daniel. That's why they throw him in the lion's den. So it says that he, verse 19, he is the first of the works of God from the land. When you go through the creation week and then the land rises, and then it's the idea of the first of beasts. Let him who made him bring near his sword, for the mountains yield food for him, where all the wild beasts play. The picture of wild beasts that you saw, like in Hosea chapter 13, is called the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the terrible beast. Does that imagery at all sound familiar? That is a picture of a fourfold dominion of Satan. He has his four creatures or his four beasts that surround his throne: a lion, a bear, a leopard, an indescribable mystical beast. God has four pictured as creatures, but the four head of the angel armies that are around his throne, right? And you had the ox, right? Then you had the lion, and then you had the man, and then you had the eagle, the mystical beast. So, can one take him by his eyes or pierce his nose with a snare? In other words, grab him by his eye sockets. That's the weird Hebrew picture here. So in Job 41, verses 1-4, let me read through that. It's now sea creature. It's the beast. It's Leviathan. And he talks about Leviathan. That's how we'll wrap up our study, since we're kind of running. Then we'll start from here. Part 2 this. Then I'll also next time, tomorrow, read from the passages of America Leviathan. Good work. Just came out. It's almost as if this guy's been watching my videos for the last 15 or 20 years. All right, here we go. It says that excuse me. Let me come back here. This is where we'll finish up. So let's look at the Leviathan beast, the sea beast, Satan, the beast power of Revelation 13 in part 1 of 13, and the part 2 is land beast. They fight. Daniel chapter 11, you have king of the north, he-goat, little horn power, Leviathan beast, the one that seeks to cast the truth to the ground, trample the sanctuary underfoot, to destroy God's people and the covenant. And then you have the land beast, the ram beast, those that are looking to be as protectors of God's people, like Cyrus was, but then eventually loses to the he-goat power of the king of the north, king of the south. The ram beast ends up becoming subjugated. Can we do a book club? That's a great idea, actually. I would love it. I would love it because I would want you to go through these books. I have plenty to go through. And then also the books that I'm doing, that is Christ is a Reality, the new one that came out, Jacob's Time of Trouble. We need to go through these things so we can become very fortified in these last days. There's a lot of really cheap and chintzy and tin horn preaching going on that's made of tinsel and aluminum. And we've just got to get into some really solid, rock solid biblical stuff to stand in these last days where our senses and our experiences will become assaulted. Don't listen to the dancing charlatans telling you to trust in experientialism. It will betray you. But it sounds so beautiful, Dave. Very enchanting, isn't it? I guess we should be believing serpents hanging between heaven and earth on a tree telling you to eat of the fruit. Right, Eve? Right, Eve? Modern Eve? Job 41, verses 1-4, 6, etc. Basically, Job 41. Sea beast, Leviathan. Can you draw out Leviathan, the sea beast, with a fish hook or press down his tongue with a cord? In other words, it's interesting if you go into Ezekiel 38-39, where again you see the treatise of the great beast that is taken up by a fish hook, a six-pronged hook, and then it'll say in the margins 6 plagues, because the 7th plague is the coming of Christ, of the 7 last plagues. It is God the seven last plagues is a picture of him putting a hook in the jaw of Leviathan and now pulling him up out of the sea and then eating him for dinner at the wedding feast. Yeah, that's the picture in the book of Ezekiel and Isaiah. When God goes to war with Leviathan, he turns it into a fish fry. Verse 2, it says, can you put a rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Like God does in Ezekiel 38 and 39 when he decides to go to war with Leviathan, and it's a war against Gog and Magog, the head and those that are joined to him. And so that Gog is the idea of a head of something. Satan, he's now the head of this world. He's the god of this age, of this present time in which we live. And then Magog are those that are joined to him. So it's like Gog in his land, or those that are connected, or so like the body of Leviathan is body politic or body society or body citizenship. The people are the body of Leviathan. So they are called Magog, or those that are dwellers in that land of Gog, that are under his canopy and care. Yeah, who can wrestle Leviathan? No, that's why he says wrestle with God. See, Jacob didn't wrestle with Leviathan. He wrestled with God. That's who we need to be wrestling with. Will he make many pleas to you? Will he speak to you soft words? No, he's going to be your accuser. He's going to be breathing fire, and he's going to be telling you that you are under a death decree. Will he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever? You see, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be bargaining. When you're under great duress and you're a POW somewhere, or you're in the death rattles, you're in bargaining mode. You think it's going to work out well for you? When Leviathan, or the dragon power, or the dominion of Satan is looking to show you that he has the power of life and death, of this present life, of temporal life and death, will you start the bargaining process with him? You think it's going to work out for you? God says, don't do it. It's not going to play out for you. Not like you think, because God is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and then he rules even cosmically beyond death. And that's the zone that Leviathan cannot penetrate. Verse 6 says, will traders bargain over him? Will they divide him among the merchants? You know, these Pentecostal churches that think that they have all this dominion and authority over Satan. Hey, don't rejoice that he's being cast to the ground. It says, you better rejoice that your name's written in the Lamb's Book of Life. You think Satan doesn't do comebacks? You think there's not blowback with poking Satan, prodding Satan, provoking Satan, angering the rage of Leviathan? You think it's a joke to enrage Leviathan? All these people in this kind of charismatic kind of influence, where this is what you see in Revelation chapter 13 on the lamb-like beast, that it causes fire to come down from heaven in the sight of men. That's the picture of Pentecost, the day of Pentecost, the day in which Elisha, fire came down and showed that God accepted a sacrifice. And we believe that this little cheesy, chintzy, experiential, sensual version of an experience with God that we've adopted as the commandment-keeping people of God, we've adopted the false spirit of the charismatics to believe that we have power over Satan, that he is some pet that we control, that we grab him by the nostrils, by the bull ring, and we control him. Do you really think that that's how it's going to play out? Do you really have that very childish token idea that you have power over the dragon? God will disabuse you of such pretentious and presumptuous and childish fantasies at the end of time. Lay your hands on him and remember the battle, and you will never do it again, big shot. Benny Hinn. And I'm not poking on Benny Hinn. I'm talking about the Benny Hinn in us, the Benny Hinn in the church. Those who thinks that we're big time pushing Satan around. What a joke. What a joke that we've decided to adopt Pentecostalism, or to adopt the charismatic false spirit of what? Fire coming down from heaven, the sight of men. We have power over Satan. Look, I'm speaking Babylonian tongues, fake tongues. The tongues that God gives us is the tongues to speak to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people in their language to bring them to the throne of Zion, to reverse what happened to the Tower of Babel. Yeah, dog walk Leviathan. Yeah, like he's a Shih Tzu. Behold, the hope of man is false. Boy, you've been lied to. He is laid low even at the sight of him. Of who? Of Leviathan. Man is laid low, not Leviathan. He does not come to heal. He's not afraid of you. He doesn't care about your shock collar. You don't take the little tennis ball thrower and throw tennis ball, and Leviathan's going to go chasing it. I think he'll just have you as a snack. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. You really think this is a joke to stir up Satan and his power and his dominion? Just even look in the political world where you saw like Trump go to war with the deep state, where the ram power decides to go to war with the little horn power. Yeah, that's no joke. That's no joke. Who then is he who could stand before me? Because God is trying to say, I'm even bigger than Leviathan. You see, we fear Leviathan, but God says, fear me. We wrestle against Leviathan. God says, wrestle against me. The way you prevail is that I break you of your loins and that you hold on to the hem of my garment, which is my wings. Your dependency upon me. Verse 11 says, who has first given to me that I should repay him? Who am I obligated to? Are you going to satisfy me through your works? Through something that you're going to pay me back for? Never pay me back for that which has no beginning, no end. That's perfect in righteousness with zero hiccups in it. You could never pay me back for what I would grant to you through my son. That's cost me an infinite, eternal price. What are you going to do? Pay me back? But Satan, because you're in usury to him, you borrowed from him. Yeah, he's going to require you to pay back with interest. And guess what? It's going to cost you your life. Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine. Who can stir off his outer garment, strip off his outer garment? You can't. Your filthy robes? No way. Who would come near to him with a bridle? You really think that we're going to control our circumstances and Satan's going to show us that? No, he's in charge. He's in control. You don't have the power to control him. All you control freaks, it's the worst day on earth for you. All of you constant manipulators that think through your slyness that you are going to bring everything to heel under you, that's the day where you find out how much control you don't have, in bold and in caps, underlined and italicized. You don't have the controls. No one, including Leviathan or Satan, is not wooed or swayed or is not manipulated by you. You will find out that he's the king of this world. And God's trying to say, and I'll let him do it, so you could see me bring him to heel. Who can open the doors of his face? You can't blow him away. You can't split him in two. You can't make him obey. Around his teeth is terror. His back is made of rows of shields. Shut up closely as with a seal. He has his own seal, his own counterfeit to the seal. He has his mark. He brings you to toe. He makes you submit. You will do whatever it takes to go along and to get along and to be in the good graces of his power and apparent authority of life and death. You will come to heel under him. You're not going to trick the devil. You'll trick yourself in thinking you could trick the devil, and then he will still bring you under his dominion, authority, under his power, his rule, his order, his Leviathan system. Think he's a joke? He's the only real enemy God has. Verse 16 says, one is so near to another that no air can come in between them. That's how solid he's got this thing dialed in. You're not going to cheat the system. We're all looking for cheat codes that we could kind of serve both God and mammon. Not going to work. Verse 17 says, they are all joined together to one another. Leviathan, Levite, bound, cloven, joined, harlot to her man, to her pimp. As opposed to God's bride, virgin bride, to her husband, her bridegroom. In the end, you're either joined to this power or you're joined to Christ, right? They clasp each other and cannot be separated. This is the picture of the seal to Satan or the mark to Satan. You see, in the Old Testament, seal and mark are the same word, tau, where this is now you're joined, now you're bound, now you are unmovable in your posture, in your position. You are now as if you're in a cave and a stone is rolled over. Or you're in a lion's den and a stone is rolled over. You are sealed. Either sealed in Leviathan or sealed in Christ. That's the eschatological picture. Nobody can get out of it. Verse 19 says, out of his mouth go flaming torches. Sparks of fire leap forth, the sparks of our own kindling. If we're going to lean upon our own understanding, if we're going to believe in that which is right in our own eyes, our own perspective, our own reference point, our own humanistic reference in which we feel and I feel in my heart and I feel and my truth, et cetera, relativism, garbage, nonsense, fool's gold, you'll fail. Sparks of your own kindling, that's your illumination, your own perspectives, your own ways of defining and interpreting and according to referencing your own brilliance. Wow. Not safe. So not safe. It says, then out of his nostrils comes forth smoke, and from a boiling pot and burning rushes, his breath kindles coals. A flame comes forth from his mouth. He is mimicking God and the quote, his nostrils and what God receives as a whole burnt offering. God's fires and coals that are kindled in the fiery stream that issues before God. He's impersonating God. He's the God of this world, the God of this age. You think that you could really cheat code Leviathan? No, I found a loophole, Dave. Wow, just endless clowns thinking we're going to cheat the system. Verse 23 says, the folds of his flesh stick together, firmly cast on him and immovable. You're going to be one with him if you are, quote, in the fake neutral zone. If you really believe that you are going to play between Christ and Satan, you're going to find out that you will be brought into an immovable position. You'll be Levied, you'll be Leviathan, you'll be cloven and joined together with him just because of your own self-sufficiency, your own presumptuous and pretentious nature, and you will by default be brought under the quote, I'm saving my skin, like the Pharisees did. They didn't want to lose their power. They claimed the temple of the Lord. God says, I've already defiled my temple. And in fact, I'm going to kill all the Philistines that have now seized my temple. I'm going to bring the pillars down upon it. You see, you can't cheat the system. You can't play with both Christ and Satan and claim religious exemption because we've seized the power of the temple. Because God will bring the temple down. Like he did in 70 AD. Leviathan, Lucifer, dragon power, his heart is hard as a stone. The hardening of the heart, like unto Satan's hardening. His own rebellion. His own not wanting to submit to the power and the authority of God. And the plagues will only harden him even more, like Pharaoh and the hardening of his heart. And when God decided to discipline the back of the fool Satan, he hardened his heart. Because he knew that at some point that Satan is going to go into full rejection of God's authority. He knew that if God asserted his power and authority, that Satan would ultimately harden himself. It says it is as hard as the lower millstone. And when he rises himself up, this little horn power, this this vessel and this proxy of Satan on earth, a Leviathan power, the mighty are afraid. Even the ram that pushed against it and prevailed for a short time, at the crashing, they are beside themselves. When Satan really rises up, it'll be like that Black Sabbath song, Black Sabbath. Oh no, please God help me. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, it's a horrifying thing when Satan rises. It's dark, dark. Though the sword reaches him, doesn't avail, doesn't carry, laughs at our tools. Nor the spear, the dart, the javelin, the arrow cannot make him flee, right? For him, sling stones are turned to stubble. All of our fantasies of what kind of great warriors we are brought down to the dust of the ground. We're brought to our weakness, to our feebleness. We're brought to our infirmed, mortal state. We're playing with the devil. But to wrap this up here, it says that his underparts are like sharp potsherds. He spreads himself like a threshing sledge on the mire. That's the position of Job in scraping himself with the potsherds. When you're under the belly of that dragon and he darkens the sun, where you no longer see the morning stars, you really realize his overreaching and overwhelming power. And we thought that it was safe to become indebted and to receive of the apparent free things from that pimp, and that you try to get out, there is no going out. Blood in, blood out. Our last few verses, and we'll wrap it up here. It says, he makes the deep boil like a pot, a time of trouble, a seething pot. It is cleansing pot. It does purge God's people. They used to throw the flesh in these seething pots and would bring all the impurities to the surface. That's why Job had boils. It's the picture of something boiling, and the seething process brings everything to the surface. All of your fears, all of your insecurities, all of your hidden sins, all of the things that we tried to stuff down in the lower chambers and pretend they're not there, all come boiling to the surface. All of our inner demons, all of our inner fears. And that's what happens. He becomes a boil pot, a seething pot. You'll see that in the book of Zechariah, the last chapter, I think chapter 13, it talks about that God allows him to cleanse his people through creating a seething pot experience. And that's what Job was going through. Everything boiled to the surface. Everything that terrified Job came to the surface. Everything that was internal, latent, intrinsic, hidden in the inner chambers is brought up to the surface. And God says that's actually for your cleansing. Confession and applying the blood of imputed righteousness of your Savior is how you're able to overcome the beast, his image, his number, and his name. You'll see that as we get into the next part of this tomorrow. He makes the sea like a pot of ointment. Strange enough, this picture of the Mediterranean Sea was this turbulent and storm-tossed sea in which brought out the fears. Like you saw the disciples in the Sea of Galilee. Every insecurity is brought to the surface. Every fear of death is brought to the surface. And we're going to need a transcendent Christ to speak peace to us and say, I've overcome those things that you fear. Like you saw with the night on the lake with Christ. Now we could picture this as an eschatological, more of an epic setting of something that's greater, when the sea is stirred up and all these beast powers come up out of the sea of Daniel and all these monstrosities come bubbling out. Imagine that personally, even for you, or imagine that globally, because they're all going to be in tandem. What is global and what is personal will all be resonating together. Deep will speak to deep. Will be happening externally, will be happening politically, economically, socially, through even atmospherically, through even what's happening with weather and natural disasters, to economic, to political, to you name it, every layer of what you call existence and what you have your way and your being in, you'll realize that Leviathan has his dragon fingers all over the controls of those things. And every fear or every false security that you have, that you are allowing yourself to be mediumed or whispered or muttered or divinized into, all of those things will be brought to the surface as a boiling pot, but also a pot of ointment. Will be strange in its healing powers. Verse 32 to 34 says, behind him he leaves a shining wake. One would think the deep to be white-haired. Now, it's interesting how he's accessing the imagery of Daniel and in Revelation, where the Father and Christ are white-haired and the hoary head, and those that are white as wool. Through confession, though your sins be as scarlet. Through confession, nakedness, authenticity, bringing the putrid sores that Isaiah chapter 1 is talking about, that Job had, sores from the top of his head to the soles of his feet. And God says, you want to be cleansed? Confession. Imputation of righteousness through your priest, through your king, through your bridegroom, through him who stands before you. Though your sins be as scarlet, they'll be made white as snow. The woolen whiteness of a sacrificial lamb. Pictured in Daniel chapter 7, pictured in Revelation chapter 1, and pictured as God's people, being cloaked in white wool. On earth, there's none like he, a creature without fear. You think he's worried about you and your little commands and your little Pentecostal, little Harry Potter, little wand that you want to poke at him? But I have the little AC/DC logo on my forehead. Yeah. He's laughing at you. Fake power, fake authority, fake religion. He sees everything that is high. He is king over all the sons of who? Pride. You think pride is going to serve us? Do you think fortifying ourselves with arrogance, presumption, pride, display, do you think that is going to break us free from Lucifer? He says, guess what? He's the king of that. He started that whole show. He's the one that authored that whole thing. You're dancing to his tune. He's not dancing to you. All right, everyone, that's it for this study. We're going to finish out the beast power, the Leviathan mind, the reality of Satan's dominion on this earth, even though it's kind of hidden right now. But it's soon to not be hidden. You're going to see this ram beast continue to push up against it. And then what will happen is that it will rise him in his state of combat, conflict, cosmic rebellion. And it will stir up the great seething pot that we call the end of time. So anyway, this is important, you guys. So I look forward to tomorrow. I want you to go through this. This is only an hour and 25 minutes. Marinate through this stuff. Bring your friends. Let's continue to read through this stuff. And I wanted to kind of get you guys to reference some of these works. Leviathan, Hobbes' Leviathan. You're going to have climate. This is all pro. This is like saying this is a good thing. And you'll see where all this stuff is coming from. And you might even be surprised. You might be supporting. You might be voting for it. You might be big supporters of Leviathan. You might find yourself cheerleading for Leviathan. You might think Leviathan's the good guy. By the time we're done with this series of studies on Leviathan and its image, you might be shocked that you may have been a big, giant sponsor of Leviathan. Wouldn't that be a horrible thing to realize that we've been fooled? We've been cheerleading for the power of Leviathan. Very, very interesting. We need to know that we're not yelling, crucify him, and choosing Barabbas at the end of time. We actually have to see. We actually have to be given eye salve. We have to be brought to low places, to cast off our rich and increased of goods and not seeing our wretchedness. This is going to be necessary for us to discern the times that we're in. All right, everyone. Thanks for being a part of the study. Keep me in prayer. Keep one another in prayer as we're now marching into the cosmic battle that ends in the lake of fire. God help us.